Hello, everyone. This is Alex, Tom's oldest daughter from Two Dads Talking. Thanks for listening to my daddy and his friend Doug's podcast. And please like, share, and subscribe to this. Thank you.
Welcome to episode 23. You guys are great. You've allowed us to record 23 episodes. You've listened. I've got people texting me and calling me and sometimes calling me names and sometimes talking to me about it. And I don't know. Doug apparently doesn't have as supportive an environment as I do, but you guys are great and I appreciate you. If you haven't by now, please share us. Please let people know that you're listening to us so we can sucker them in too. And make sure you're getting at us. Give us some feedback. Hit us up on social media, Two Dads Talking Podcast. Find us anywhere that you're streaming and leave comments, leave reviews. We love that you're listening, but we want to make it better. So let us know how to do that, please.
Thank you.
And now on to Doug. Hi, Doug.
Yes, hello, Tom. Yeah, that was good. I'm not going to change any of that. Just the usual PSA about, don't hurt Tom if you actually like Tom. And yeah, it's been fun so far. It's been interesting to just see the support that we've been getting, and it's very much appreciated. Of course, it's very flattering, very humbling in a lot of ways too. So I'm in a very just business-like mood tonight, so I kind of want to get right into our topic because we've got plenty to do on the other end of this. We were just talking about how we're stretched crazy thin sometimes it seems like, and we can barely even feels like find time to do this, it seems. So last week, Tom brought up the Alabama IVF ruling, and because of the kind of week I was having, I basically said, "What?" And usually, this is exactly the kind of thing that I would not be in the dark about. I feel like I would be abreast of this sort of thing. And I think it's, now that I've had a chance to look into it a little bit, I think it's one hell of a topic that we could talk about because, well, so many reasons. I'm curious to hear what Tom thinks of this specifically. And I think there's so many. One of my favorite things is unintended consequences, as has been previously discussed. And I think there's a treasure trove of potential unintended consequences on both sides, if you will, from this kind of issue, depending upon your feelings on the matter. So there was I guess it was three sets of parents or three couples sued. Was it a fertility clinic?
It was a fertility clinic, yeah.
Yeah,
they were suing them under the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act.
Right. And because of, I guess, destroyed embryos. Is that correct?
Yeah. There's a patient that walked in the room where the embryos were stored and grabbed some of the vials. And the way that they were stored in the cold storage, clearly you need to wear gloves. And they got some freezer burn essentially from touching it and dropped the vials and broke them and destroyed the embryos. And then the donors of those embryos, the parents, tried to sue for wrongful death of a child. And initially the court said, no, this doesn't qualify. I'm sorry. Your embryos do not count as kids. You can't sue the fertility clinic. And then last week, that opinion got overturned and reversed.
Okay. I didn't know the setup for all of it. I just knew where the opinion went. So yes. So the opinion, the final, well, air quotes, final ruling at this point was that the Alabama Supreme Court is saying that embryos, and this is important, if we're going to wade into this issue, we should try to be particular with our wording so that we're not being too unclear. They're saying embryos, not unfertilized eggs, not like, zygotes or sperm or anything like that. They're saying an embryo, which is a fertilized egg. They're saying that counts as a child and therefore falls under the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act. And of course, people are now extrapolating that out to say that there can be, with the way fertility clinics operate, everyone's going to be liable. It's going to completely kill, unintended, all IVF in at least the state. And everyone has an opinion on it. It seems like the biggest backlash is the people against the ruling.
I think that this makes a lot of sense on the part of the fertility clinics and the courts, because with the nature of, and I'm definitely going to get this acronym wrong 100 times, but IVF, in-vitro fertilization, I think.
Yes.
And during the process, anything can go wrong. During the storage, anything can go wrong. A lot of times something happens once after the embryos have been fertilized, created, they've been stored, and then the parents may get a divorce, or a parent may pass away, or they may suddenly become pregnant and no longer want this process to happen. There are a lot of cases where these embryos created during the IVF process are no longer wanted by the parents. And the parents tell them, never mind, dispose of them. Or the first one takes and they say, dispose of the other two or three we had in storage. And then the fertility clinic does so. Now, if that happens, if anything at all happens to these embryos or to the parents, they no longer want the embryos. Maybe both parents are in a car crash and both of them die, and now there are no parents for these embryos. The clinic can no longer dispose of the embryos. So now they're responsible to take care of these indefinitely. There's no end term on how long this will be considered a protectable life. Now, if anything ever happens to these embryos, the clinic will fall under this wrongful death of a minor act and be civilly and criminally liable. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that you have to keep these embryos alive longer than the parents and any actual, any live children they may have, and any grandchildren they may have, and their children and their children. You may have to keep these embryos alive and safely stored in a state of stasis for literally 1,000 years, when there could be no one left in the entire bloodline, or you could be civilly and criminally subject to breaking the law, to fines, to penalties, to getting shut down, to jail time if you're the person doing it. It doesn't make sense to me that we should be holding these clinics who are providing a service at people's voluntary will liable to that level, I guess, is the right way to put this. I think it just creates an impossible situation to adjudicate in an ethically responsible way. So from a business perspective and from a common sense perspective, I think this makes a lot of sense.
You think the ruling makes a lot of sense, or you think
Yes.
the ruling does not make a lot of sense?
I think the ruling makes a lot of sense.
I think I'm going to gloss real quick over the religious side of this. The religious side of this makes sense. Most Christian, nice, come on, that wasn't that much of a shock. The most Christian and many other religious groups say you have a human upon fertilization, in the womb. So if you have an embryo, yes, it's frozen. Yes, it's outside of the womb, but by religious definition, that is a human at conception. So religiously, real easy to side with the court. Where it gets a little bit hairier is the non-religious aspect, which I will say that I'm still going to defend the court on this one, because I actually try to avoid the religious stuff on this, because this is not the Alabama Supreme Court should not be a religious entity. It should be a state entity, even if it's embedded in religion, like, the God being written into the Constitution and all that fun stuff, like the Founding Fathers said. This is, I think, if you allow for the fact that these are human beings, or at least potential human beings, we don't have to say that they have the same amount of rights per se, or the same amount of, I don't really want to say viability, because it is viability. That's exactly the point of IVF, is to make a viable potential human baby to carry to term and have for your own child. So a potentially viable human is this embryo. We already have businesses and people trying to freeze themselves so that they can be awakened at some point in the future when we have the technology to cryogenically unfreeze them so that they can live again. If you think destroying the embryos is allowed, in my mind, you should also be fine with destroying even the people who opted to freeze themselves at their death, because that is someone who actually lived their life and is no longer alive functionally, and they are expecting to be maybe frozen for 1,000 years too, and then awakened again, and they are getting that service. So if you're looking at it from purely a human rights perspective, who are you to say that this embryo, who could be inserted into a womb and grown into a real live functioning human being, has less rights than someone who's already lived their life and is dead? So that's my first thought, if you want to defend the court, is that there's other freezing things going on here that people are perfectly fine with. And if someone walked in and burned down a place with a bunch of cryogenically frozen people hoping to wake up in 500 years, I do feel like that would be some sort of crime. And some people would be looking for actual murder or homicide or manslaughter or whatever kind of charges because they are intentionally stopping someone's desire to live later. The other side of this too is, I think, really the Alabama Supreme Court is ruling on what they're really trying to rule is they're trying to limit the in vitro fertilization. They're not trying to say that, oh, this is just going to be your problem now and you have to deal with it. I think what they really are trying to get is to say, hey, this in vitro fertilization stuff is getting out of hand. It's not a service that we as a state think should be offered constitutionally. So if you're going to continue IVF, you should be trying, say, one at a time. You should not be doing multiples and storing them and kind of keeping them in the chamber for later. I believe there's already plenty of places in Europe that actually do this already, where you're only legally allowed to do one IVF attempt at a time. You're not allowed to do multiple embryos at once, or at least it's like two at a time to see if one of them takes. And then it's not meant to be stored for later. So it's not like there's no precedent for a practice that fits within this mold anyway. So, and this is, I'm not talking religiously. I'm talking functionally, legally, what have you. It's effectively the same side conversation that happens with abortion. At what point does, I guess, a fetus, an embryo, become a human life? That's always kind of the crux of the entire issue whenever you're talking about something like this. And my personal thought is that while I have a personal opinion about it, where it starts, if you can't be exactly sure based on developmental timelines or based on, for example, they talk about how around 15 weeks, a fetus has a heartbeat. I would venture to guess that maybe, depending upon development timelines, some fetuses have that a little bit earlier, some have that a little bit later. You know, even kids out of the womb still develop at different rates with different things. And if you say, well, at some point in the womb, it becomes a human, but it's not before then, well, then when exactly does that happen? And when can we pinpoint it? And how can we test that? And then can we stay legally true to that? If you were really, truly trying to play it safe in the interest of protecting children in the womb, because I think most people rationally agree that if a child is in a womb and 8.5 months pregnant, that's a child. That's not just some clump of cells at that point. I feel like the point that everyone can agree on that happens where the process starts is the fertilized egg, is the embryo. So legally, I think there's actually a easier case to be made for saying if it's an embryo, it's a human, as opposed to, say, heartbeat or respiratory or other things that you might not even necessarily know at a particular point in time when you're making these decisions. Because you don't want to put someone in a situation where you say, oh, well, if we have a heartbeat, it's a human. And if we don't have a heartbeat, it's not. Someone does a test, detects a heartbeat, turns out they were actually detecting like mom's heartbeat or something like that. And then it turns out we have some legal trouble because now they ended up aborting someone who was legally an infant at that point because they were 15 or 16 weeks old. I'm not sure if that made a lot of sense the way I was trying to convey it.
I think it makes sense, but a lot of the foundation upon it which it's built is not quite right, is the problem.
Well, agree to disagree. I guess I need to take it back. Basically, if we're trying to pick a point where a fertilized egg becomes human, there is exactly one point for sure that every single one goes through, and that's fertilization. So it's actually more convenient and I think more black and white from a legal perspective to rule based on that as opposed to other metrics. So we can either take a muddy issue and create muddy legal precedents, or we can try to take clearer legal precedents on a muddy issue. And you'll have different opinions on that. You will. I mean, legally, I think going right at fertilization is not necessarily the best one because you have to cater to the non-religious types. But I think it is the cleanest for making decisions legally or otherwise.
I actually agree with that. I think that is, if you're trying to clarify it and you're going for transparency and something that can be easily empirically understood, defined, I think that's probably the only way to really do it. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But the
So
heartbeat starts happening around like 6 or 7 weeks, not 15.
Oh, is it? And what's
You
the
were
15
way
weeks?
off on that one.
I mean, okay, so that actually kind of helps defending the Alabama court more, though.
Yeah, I think
But
maybe it does.
what
Yeah.
was it then at 14 or 15 weeks? Maybe it was something like the pain or like nervous system or something then, or whatever. There's something big at 15 weeks. Maybe it's the respiratory one. Maybe it's the lungs and all that. Because I remember 15 weeks being one of those big ones because that's also how we judge how medical personnel will call a time of death is like based on its respiratory and then I want to say something like heartbeat, respiratory plus heartbeat. If you don't have either, it's death. You have to have two specific systems actually inoperable to call it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to say so.
That's one, given our history, I should probably know more about, but I don't.
Samesies. I don't know. That felt good. Do you want to be the asshole now?
I was going to, and I was ready to do it and jump in a bit the other side, but I actually am so strongly opposed to like everything that you said. I think I'm just going to dig my heels in. So the stuff I was saying was,
let's do it.
Was not how what I actually wanted to say against this. Okay. That crap kind of makes sense to me, but I don't care much about the business side of this. This is life. In my mind, this is a question of life. And so the business side of it should shrink down and not be that important and not be the frontline reason for doing something and deliberating something. So everything that I said, it may be true from a practical perspective. It is not why I'm opposed to this. I am staunchly opposed to the finding and the statement made by the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama. I am horrifically appalled at what they actually said and why they're doing this and what they put into state law. And a lot of it is very different from, specifically the things that you said. So awesome. Okay. Screw this devil's advocate crap. I'm going to go ahead and go where my heart is on this one. I cannot believe that in their actual position, oh gosh, I have to find the quote now. I should have had this right here on hand. I had it almost memorized a week ago because it made me so irritated. Here we go. The people of Alabama have declared the public policy of the state to be that unborn human life is sacred. We believe that each human being from the moment of conception is made in the image of God, created by him to reflect his likeness. This is what's now on record by the state government as to why this law exists. And I know that separation of church and state is not written into the Constitution. I know it's just an idea that Thomas Jefferson put out there. I know that you've got the barrier created by the First Amendment that says the government can't force you to worship a certain way, and that's not how we interpret separation of church and state. But the idea of it, as Jefferson put it forward, is very important to me. And to go ahead and say that we're going to make a law because of our monotheistic Christian belief, and we're going to hold everybody to this law, regardless of what your belief and your practice is, seems to me a violation of an amendment that says our government is not going to dictate how we religiously practice or abstain from it. This seems to me very much like the state government pushing its religious position onto everyone, regardless of theirs, and forcing them to fall in line with a Christian belief. And I find that to be wrong. I would find it to be wrong if it was a Muslim approach or a Buddhist approach or a shamanistic approach or a pagan approach. The state does not get to force laws on us governed by religious beliefs. That's not correct. That's not how it's supposed to be. And that is my first issue with this. That is my chief issue. My second issue is that I also read this similar to the way you did, where I went, oh, this is Alabama's way of trying to say we don't want IVF happening in our state, and we're going to try to make it harder to do so that people don't do it here. And that one really upset me because it's, again, not their business. The state doesn't get to determine what sort of businesses, if they're legal, people are running in their state.
Yes, they do.
They shouldn't.
Some places say no adult entertainment, and they're allowed to do that.
I guess that's probably true. I hadn't thought of that. But I mean, this is
admittedly, these are wildly different things. So that's
comparing apples to labradoodles in my mind.
Yes, they're both things, though, Tom.
Yes, but this is a thing that is important to people's lives and the trajectory of their families and their mental health and sometimes their physical well-being. This
Sorry,
is,
I didn't mean to jump in. I just kind of wanted to say, well, that's not broad brush, but keep going.
you are always welcome to jump in, Doug. With both feet or a cannonball, you are always welcome to take a dive into my murky, muddy waters. Don't worry about it. Again, this has to do with human life and is more important than business. And I don't understand where a state can come in and kind of sneakily say, we don't approve of you building your family this way. So we are going to make it hard for you to do it. By doing this, it makes these fertility clinics, they now have to carry more insurance. They have to carry more liability. They have to be more careful in their everyday tasks and probably hire new people and limit the number of patients that they will take based on risk assessments and limit the number of embryos they are going to store or expand their storage facilities. Any way you shape this, it increases the cost and the liability on fertilization clinics and makes them not want to help people. We have a friend here who this was their only path to pregnancy and having a family. And she and her husband really badly wanted children. And she is a wonderful woman. I've never met her husband, but she's a wonderful woman. And she often watches our kids and we need a night out. And this is how she got pregnant. And it was the only path for her to do so. And she tried multiple times before it worked. Had she not had this as an option to her, she would not get the family that she wants and frankly deserves. And Alabama basically says, I'm sorry, you might be a wonderful, loving mother. You might raise a productive child who's good for society with values and ethics and good actions throughout the course of their life. But we don't approve how you're going to do it. Since you can't biologically have a child the way we want you to, we're going to go ahead and say you can't do that. And that's not the state's right. It's just not. So this thing ticks me off in that way. And your mention on the IVF, just from personal insight from conversations I've had there, I know you said that, force them to just do one embryo at a time. The reason that a lot of places do more than one at a time is because of the super low percentage that an embryo will implant. And these people are paying between $15,000 and $30,000 every time they try this. And a lot of it's not necessarily going to be covered by your insurance. So imagine if your only chance for children was costing you $15,000 to $30,000 every time you tried. How many bullets could you fire there realistically? And you've got a good income and you're a successful guy. I'm going to guess you're above the median income. How many shots do you think you and your wife could fire in that case if you weren't able to have kids? I'm honestly asking, how many times do you think you could try that?
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't be trying any. Maybe one if I was in that situation and wanted to go that route. I mean, if you're just talking purely the finances, maybe one. If you want a realistic answer to the question.
Yeah, I think that's what I was looking for. In my case, we probably would not, when we had children in our lives, we probably couldn't have afforded $15,000 to $30,000 or $15,000 to $40,000 to try to get my wife, impregnated this way. So we would have had to have looked at adoption, and there's nothing wrong with adoption. But we both badly wanted children that were from us and of us and in our image. It's something that we wanted. It's part of why I think we have children, and part of why I believe the Bible is written the way that it is if we are created in God's image and he is our father, that makes us want to carry that act on, and it makes us want to create as God. And that's in a large part what having children is. It's a part of us realizing our own divinity. And I think that's built into our psyches and built into our spiritualism. And I think that's built into us to want to do that. And Alabama is essentially saying, we believe in a Christian God, but if you're not able to have kids like God, then fuck you. We don't want you to have kids. That's what Alabama's saying. And it's one more reason that I will not root for the Crimson Tide.
I don't think that's what they're saying.
I'm going to dig my heels in on that one, and I really do think that's what this is. I 100%
think they're saying it that way.
Of course not. They're being a little more sneaky about it and saying, no, you're just a sinner and an evil person if you don't have a child the natural way. You're just a horrible, evil person who's going to hell. And, we endorse this as the state of Alabama. We'll go ahead and roll the Roll Tide buses up to your doorstep and help drive you down. It's fine.
So it will be received that way by a lot of people with the good old-fashioned FU, but I don't think that's the intent of what they're actually saying. What I was trying to find all that time, and I couldn't find it. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that this makes it right, but I want to just say that there are plenty of records, because someone had found it earlier. Someone had pulled a quote from one of the founding fathers from one of the papers after the fact that was asking about the separation of church and state. And they said, make no mistake about it, God is a part of this. He like God and religious, like inalienable rights, human rights are deliberately put into our founding documents. That there's a reason that there's the mention of that there. So we can have a discussion about whether or not that should actually dictate our law. But the founders of the country were very deliberately saying, no, this English king can't tell us what to do. Only God can. So to say that Alabama is forcing their religious, views into the law, whether or not that's actually correct, an argument could be made that if it's the Judeo-Christian thing from the founding fathers, if that could have been actually some of the founding fathers' intent. And I mean, governments force how we live our lives to a degree in certain ways on us all the time. I mean, any law, any restriction of some potential freedom is exactly what that is. So what they are saying is not, I don't think they're saying our religion says this is human life, so you're SOL. I think what they're saying is this may very well be considered a human life, and the steps have been taken as they normally would in an otherwise normal situation to create a human life by fertilizing an egg and turning it into an embryo. Normally, it just happens in the womb. Now it's just happening outside the womb. Ergo, this could be considered a human life. This, if a state is saying, "Hey, no abortion because we think it's a human life at conception," and they're at least trying to argue that they're doing it from a constitutional or legal perspective and not a religious perspective, I think you have to rule the way the Alabama Supreme Court did to be consistent. If you're going to sit there and claim that a fertilized egg in a womb is potentially legally a human, then a fertilized egg outside of the womb can also be considered a human and therefore subject to other legal precedents like the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act. So we can talk about whether or not it actually applies here, but I don't think they're just sitting here trying to swing their dicks around and say, oh, well, we finally got a chance to impose our religion on people. I think they're trying to say, hey, if we feel like you could classify someone as a person at this point, then it makes sense. I don't think they're trying to just reach here and just be theocratic rulers. I could be wrong. I'm obviously not in their minds, so I can't say that for sure. But, well, let me clarify. So that's a semi-response to your first part is, yes, they are trying to inflict some will, if you will, upon the people of their state in a way that is often very religiously charged. I think it is possible to come to this same legal ruling and not actually have it be religiously charged.
But they didn't.
And that's why I brought up the point that even the founding fathers are saying, no, God was included very purposefully.
But the founding fathers also said that slavery was okay and they weren't going to outlaw it because the South didn't want to join them if they couldn't have slaves. So they said, okay, slavery is okay. And they also said that the right to vote wasn't really all that important, that it's okay that less than 10% of our people can vote. They also said that just because they said something back in 1776 does not mean that it is accurate today or that it was correct.
I allowed that. And I mean, there are some documents that some of these guys wrote that said, hey, I don't actually think slavery is all that good, but we're kind of running a lesser of two evils concept here. Yep. and saying we hope that what we just laid out will eventually get rid of this crap. So some of them did actually say that. Others, I'm sure they were fine having their slaves. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying these guys were like, moral arbiters of all time. Like they were human. They, of course, had plenty of shit that they were doing wrong. So I'm just making the point that to say that a religious aspect or a God aspect in the law is not entirely ludicrous given what some of the foundation was at the time. Like that concept alone is actually not new to our country at all.
I would agree. But now it's being punitive based on religion. And that's the
But how is it not? If the government does something that's not punitive, then why do they even bother doing it?
Like, the government does lots of things that aren't punitive.
Well, but okay, like infrastructure, great, but like
sure.
you got to punish
Giving
someone.
Tax breaks isn't punitive.
Well, but if you build a road, you have to stop people from destroying the road, and you got to have punishment for it. Otherwise, people will destroy the road and not give a shit. Like, I mean, again, bad
that's
analogy.
Kind of a stretch. That's actually a pretty big leap.
I'm trying to make a really off the cuff point here, Tom, is that if
you're not doing a good job, Douglas.
Sorry. If the government wants to say something should not be done, it has to be punitive. I mean, and then the debate should be whether they are allowed to do this or not, which is what we're talking about. But
sure.
But
if they're saying that it's punitive and it should not be done because of their religious beliefs, now you are punishing people who are choosing to observe religion and spirituality different than your position. That is what you're not supposed to be doing according to the First Amendment. That is the only thing written in the Constitution about it. That's exactly it.
Stop calm yelling at me.
Am I calm? Wow. All right.
Ish. So I agree with you. What you said, your words that came out of your mouth, I agree with you. My pseudo devil's advocate on this is I am contending, number one, that our foundational documents did have God baked into a degree on purpose. Take that as you will. That's not the end all be all. I'm just saying that this is not a new concept from a law standpoint, a legal standpoint, because it was right there at the very beginning. Number two, I think there is a potential that you could reach this conclusion legally without a religious precedent behind it. Because again, when do you call someone a human? Do you call them a human when they come out of the womb? That gets muddy because you can have, preemies and all that stuff. Do you call it a heartbeat? Do you call it respiratory function? Do you call it a central nervous system? Some people in their own locality, their own legal locality, may get together and say, you know what? No, embryo, because that's the thing that's going to become a human. Now you've actually done the real thing that has to happen. That's the specific act that starts all of it. So legally, not religiously, you could pick that. If you decide to hang your hat on that, now it does have to follow some of these other legal precedents like wrongful death of a minor. And you know what? The IVF clinics, they may have the best of intentions, but if that legal precedent is there, then if they don't follow it, they're breaking the law. And I'm not trying to sit here and lean on the whole pound sand or kick rocks kind of concept, but that's sort of what it is. There's not a purely religious way to get to this. If they did it purely out of religious reasons, then yeah, shame on them. You need to, at least if you have this personal belief, you need to find a way to do it legally / non-religiously / in a way that at least people can buy into it, and it can be set up so that if people's minds change later, they can change it. That being said, the second part that you went to about people who can't have children and who need to do the IVF. Sorry, 1 second. I just gotta give me 30 seconds. I need to run up and change the thermostat.
Okay.
And then I'll be right back.
Seems like more than the 30-second job.
I mean, it's one button push.
Okay. Well, that makes. Oh, I thought you meant something far different. I thought you meant changing one out.
I've created 3 embryos in 30 seconds.
All right. So Doug had to step away to go upstairs and to change his thermostat. Apparently, he's got to turn the temperature up or down. So I'm going to take this moment to go back on my rant a little bit. He can cut it in post, or he can leave it in, and I'll leave that totally up to him. I really despise the argument that because our forefathers did something 250 years ago that was right for that time, that means we can automatically, without giving it any further consideration or sense of modern context, whether or not it's right for us today. And Doug is back now, and he's putting in his earbuds. So it was a much, much shorter monologue than I thought it was going to be because he's back.
I'm on to you son of a biscuit.
It's all right. I got you to run up and down the stairs a little faster. I feel like I was just good for your health. You're welcome.
I mean, I think the best part is that because there's all the toys back here in the background, I'm doing the weird sneak run where my knees are going up real high.
American Ninja Warrior back there. Yep.
It's not. I'm more like Beverly Hills Ninja.
That was an underrated movie too.
It was an underrated movie. So now that I've made some lighthearted, self-deprecating jokes aside, time to turn back into an asshole. So for the second part, Tom just made a face like he's so disappointed in me already because
I am. But it's all right. I still love you. It's okay. We're allowed to see this differently.
Heartsies. Well, that's the beauty of this. I have known people in the same position who have the IVF is kind of their only option.
They've made attempts at it, whether it's worked or not, and it is expensive. And they definitely, you definitely don't want to be just going back and doing this multiple times. So there's really no way to say how I feel about this without someone interpreting it as, tough shit, sort of. It's the same kind of thing as I was saying earlier. From a religious perspective, it's very easy to make the argument of, well, you can't have children, so God, as your father who's looking out for you and raising you, if you will, thinks you shouldn't have children. I actually don't necessarily think that's a very lazy take. For me, that's literally very Old Testament, because they used to say, oh, look, you're a hobo on the street. Oh, look, you have leprosy. God must hate you. You must be a sinner. And then, Jesus kind of told them all to shut the fuck up and cured lepers and all that fun stuff. So that's a lazy take. That's not what I'm getting at here. From a religious perspective, you can make the argument that God actually wants something else from you that's more important. And having a child, you may very well be a good parent, but that will distract / inhibit a little bit, maybe a potential grander plan for you. Now, again, I'm talking from a religious / God perspective. Because as we also know, there are plenty of people out there who should not be having kids, but they are. So this might also, to be perfectly honest, I've almost had half a mind of a whole other topic for another time, probably, but I have this weird thought that God cares a little bit less about exactly who can and can't have children and exactly what you can and can't do when it comes to that. I think God just has it set up to where if you're supposed to have kids, you have the kids you're supposed to have, or at least the kids that quote need to be there, that are part of the plan. He just makes it happen. However, there's a zillion different ways it can happen, and he's just looking to give everyone their shot. He sort of knows everyone he's going to create or who would be created, and in some way everyone gets a version of their trial, of their shot. And for him, it just doesn't matter sometimes it doesn't matter who the parent is or who the person is that does that. It's all about each individual, not necessarily the parents and who has what. There's no real way I could ever really explain this clearly, but that's in a nutshell what I think is that if you don't have kids, it's not necessarily because you're not supposed to have kids. It's just because God already was taking care of this generation through other people. And you're there to do something else. Maybe it is adoption. Maybe it's just to not do that. But the IVF thing, and the IVF thing could be one of those tools that God is completely fine with. But because we're wonderful humans, it gets misused. People do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 embryos at a time. And again, I'm completely just taking my what do they call it when, like, burden of proof, like where it's disprovable in a way. Like, I'm going to just make an assertion and you can't ever really say, well, you're wrong. I mean,
right. You can't prove a negative.
Right, exactly. Maybe God is just sitting there saying, yeah, IVF, totally cool. Like, I mean, that's another avenue that you smart humans have figured out, and I'm totally cool with that. Except you probably shouldn't do it like 5 embryos at a time. I would prefer you try it just once, and you guys should. You're jerks for making it cost $15,000. You can find a way to make it cost $2,000 or whatever. It's a fine process, but there's plenty of human fault in it that makes it, in a way, ironically less viable because of how expensive it is. But trying to argue from a less religious standpoint, if you can't have kids, and this is why I said it was going to come across as sort of a tough shit situation, it's sort of the cards you're dealt. I mean, that sounds insensitive, but there's lots of things that I cannot do. And it's not my fault, but I have not had the physical or mental or even emotional capacity to do any of these things. And that's part of the beauty, in a way, of being human, is that there are plenty of things that we all suck at, and there are plenty of things that we're all pretty good at. And it's up to us to find our little niche, our little way to contribute to everything. And because everything is linked to DNA essentially, or to biology, yeah, I mean, because part of biology is procreation, not everyone's going to have well-working procreation. So you can try IVF, but it's kind of literally fucking with the process a little bit. I mean, it's sort of the other side of the abortion coin for me. Is you can make the argument that not that you weren't supposed to be able to do this and that's why you can't, but just that this is sort of just the hand you're dealt. This is your lemon that you were given. And it's not sexy at all. It's kind of a mean suggestion, and real rich coming from me just having had my third kid. But
and that's part of what I was going to rebut with. So
that's part of it. Yeah. I mean, I understand that, but I mean, I can tell you with absolute certainty, I absolutely wanted to be a pro athlete, but that was not the hand I was dealt. And I worked my ass off to basically realize that I had no chance at that. And at some point I just had to accept that. If I just kept trying, then that would also be in some ways kind of destructive too, for me emotionally. So again, bad analogy, kind of different things. And I guess I could have responded by doing something else, at least orbiting those kinds of industries, but I didn't. And so it's, again, I understand that in this particular issue, it's real easy for me to say, well, maybe that's just not what it's meant to be because I haven't had to go through that. I mean, me and my wife have talked a couple of different times before about how you hear the stories about people who try to get pregnant and they're trying for a year plus, and they finally get there and they're super excited about it. And, that's just, I can't even imagine being in a position where, as far as you can tell, there's nothing, quote, wrong with either of you. And you're doing everything you possibly can to get there to have a kid. And every time it just doesn't work, that's got to be so disheartening. And that's got to be disheartening pretty quickly. So I don't envy the people that have to do this. I mean, I can see how IVF would be considered a last, at least semi-hopeful shot. And you're willing to put up the bucks to do that. But again, I mean, is that really what you could be doing with your time? And I think that's a question that everyone has to answer for themselves. I think IVF should be something that's allowed, but I do think it needs to be reined in a little bit more because we are toying with what is a extremely powerful process. Whether you're religious or not, I feel like the thing that makes more of us humans has to be considered a pretty significant process that we have to absolutely take pause before we do anything that even just impacts that at all. So,
oh boy, I got so much. You gave me so much to go with here. Okay.
Oh no, I was hoping we would get to dad jokes.
No. You opened lots of cans of worms. You opened cans of worms inside of cans of worms inside of cans of worms. I do want to start with a disclaimer. Doug and I are both men, and we're both middle-aged men, and we are not experts on this topic.
As far as you know, you call me middle-aged, you
yes.
son of a bitch.
Get over it, old fart. There are a lot of things we're going to say on this that people can fact check and be like, you dumbasses. I can't believe you didn't know this. Kind of like when Doug said, the heartbeat starts at 15 weeks. At least I knew that one. Like I'm sure we are each going to say a ton of things that listeners who are more educated on this are going to be like, you dummies, you are so far off base. I just Googled one to
and
see
you'll
how
be
many. Right. You will be right. That's why I'm starting
right.
this off with, don't be mad at us. We're not perfect. We did this on a whim. We didn't research before we talked. Most of this is on the cuff. Please forgive us our ignorance instead of just getting angry at us. And we're happy to discuss this. But if we're offending anyone with our ignorance, just know that's not our intention. We have other ways we intend on offending you. We don't intend on doing it because we are not well educated on a topic and accidentally misspeak. So let me just get out there and cover our butts a little bit and say our intent is not to upset you with mistaken facts, if that's what it is. Okay,
just found our new intro.
Oh, good. Wonderful. That's probably pretty good. Yep.
Just put that at the beginning of everything.
Okay, now let's just start shooting down some of these things that Doug just talked about out of his butt that were completely and factually incorrect.
Man,
and we're going to start.
Mean. We're
going to start with this whole premise that we are abusing this thing and going too far with it and inserting lots of embryos at once, and it's a problem. I had to Google it because I didn't know. And it seems that it is limited to one at a time already. The process, as recommended by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, now recommends one embryo at a time, regardless of age. And the safety of assisted reproductive technology also recommends only one embryo transfer. So it seems like the best practice right now is actually one at a time.
Okay, best practice, but is that actually how it's done? Now, okay, should the law support best practices?
Well, if all the experts, the CDC, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, if they are all saying it should be limited to one, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that no doctor or fertility clinic wants to be sued for going against this, and they're probably doing one at a time, is my guess. So I think that's just an important point.
I should find it before I just go off the cuff again, but I was reading that a lot of times they have 2 or 3 on hand at a time.
My understanding is that they used to put a bunch of them in, but as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I realized where that came from for me. It came from an episode of Friends where they put like 5 of them in Phoebe at one time and she has triplets. And it came from stories about Octomom who had like 8 kids at a time, and allegedly it's because they inserted a bunch of them. So that's where my bias came from, where I thought they did multiples at a time. But I did a quick scroll here, and it seems like, generally speaking, they do one at a time.
Tom, we're both right. Okay.
Oh, good. That never happens, especially when you're so wrong about everything else today. That never happens.
It happens all the time. The number of embryos created in IVF depends on the number and quality of eggs and sperm, and only a fraction of them reach the blastocyst stage. The number of embryos transferred during IVF is usually 1 or 2 for women under 35 years. And up to 5 for women over 40 years.
Okay, where is that information coming from? Give me a source.
IndiraIVF.com.
So not any of the major oversight bodies that are giving the expert advice on what should be done? This is someone else?
You're going straight for the ad hominem.
Oh, I am, baby. I am. It's been a long time since you and I saw something this differently, and I'm enjoying this. This is good.
I know. I mean, well, do you really want to lean on big, large, especially government oversight group, considering what we saw with the World Health Organization and COVID-19 and everything else with their mask and everything?
Well, they all had differing opinions, and we were just told to listen to the World Health Organization. Here, it seems they all have the same opinion, that we should do one embryo at a time. And it seems as though that's been pretty standard since at least 2018. So that's why I'm curious what your source is on this.
No, I mean, that's fair. I'm just saying, ironically, I'm in an emotional state right now where if it comes from a large centralized authority group, I'm kind of like, kind of don't trust you right now.
Well, and that bias makes sense too. We've been led to a place now where expertise bias is not what it used to be. And now we distrust people who are allegedly experts. So I get that too. But again, I gave you my people, and I want to know who this person is.
Here's the Center for Genetics and Society that says 1.7 million human embryos created for IVF are thrown away.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Since August 1991, more than 3.5 million human embryos have been created, producing only 235,000 gestational sacs or evidence of successful implementation.
That number seems really low.
Well, this is since 1991.
Right. So you're telling me in 30 years, only 235,000 children have.
This article was written in 2012 officially. So I know I'm hitting an old source, but.
Yeah. Give me something more current, please.
Man.
You're talking.
You're just on the warpath tonight.
That's 12 years old.
You're 12 years old.
You know how much medicine has changed in 12 years?
Oh, not that much.
I disagree. Holy moly. The ankle surgery that I had 15 years ago compared to the one my wife just had, totally different, and hers is amazingly more efficient.
That's actually true. There are some things that they're doing now that are pretty neat. It's like outpatient surgery now, when it used to be like 4 days in the hospital for some of these things. Yeah. So it is pretty cool.
Okay, stop distracting. Get back. I want a source with some modern dates. Give me something that holds up here.
Okay.
Or we can just admit that we were both operating under the idea that this was done like 7 or 8 at a time, and it's probably not. That's how I feel, because I was with you. I thought it was done lots of them at a time. And I'm now looking at these and scrolling through all these major organizations, and it seems like they're all saying, no, just do one.
I liked the disclosure of just saying we're probably wrong and then just going with it.
Oh, that's important too. That's very important. I see a 2016 article that says different numbers. That says they should be doing more. But literally everything I see that's 2018 or more recent seems to say just one. So I think we were operating off of an old belief here.
No, I got one for you. You ready for this?
Yes.
In vitro fertilization, Mayo Clinic.
Okay, that's a good one.
And it's kind of further down here. I scrolled back up to get it.
I'll listen to the Mayo Clinic. I'm curious what they say.
How many embryos will be transferred? The number of embryos placed in the uterus often is based on age and the number of eggs collected. Since the rate of fertilized eggs attaching to the lining of uterus is lower for older people, usually more embryos are transferred, except for people who use donor eggs from a young person, genetically tested embryos, or in certain other cases. Most healthcare professionals follow specific guidelines to prevent a multiple pregnancy with triplets or more. In some countries, legislation limits the number of embryos that can be transferred. Make sure you and your care team agree on the number of embryos that will be placed in the uterus before the transfer procedure. So they don't give you exact numbers, but they're basically allowing for the fact that it could be multiple and it's you and your doctor.
And what's the year on it?
It's just their Mayo Clinic site. Let me see if I can find like a last update or something.
Yeah.
By Mayo Clinic staff, September 1st, 2023.
Okay, so that's recent. Okay.
So, yes.
Interesting. But it does say some states limit it. See, now I'm going to do a deeper dive.
It's less than one pregnancy ago, Tom.
Yeah. That's fine. Now I'm going to do a deeper dive on this. This is what I've been reading up all weekend.
I don't have time to do this deeper dive.
That's too bad. Okay, so that's one point of yours that we've already blasted. Okay.
Blastocyst?
Yes, blastocyst. So to your position on God and his feelings toward IVF.
Hey, I very much qualified that by saying
You absolutely did.
That's total philosophical silliness.
I want to point out, and we'll go back to philosophical so that you can feel unjudged by this. I want to point out the irony of a religion built on Jesus Christ being the savior, of that religion saying IVF is not something we want. Because remind me again how he was born. The Immaculate Conception, is that closer to IVF, or is that more like daddy and mommy had a quiet night and the kids were in bed and mommy got pregnant? The Immaculate Conception sounds to me like awfully close to IVF.
So
go ahead.
I mean, which feels more immaculate, Tom?
I'm going by the definition that the Christian faith has pushed on me for all this time. That Mary was a virgin when she was impregnated and did not have sex. And so if that's the case, if she was filled with the Holy Spirit and made pregnant, but it wasn't a sexual thing and she was still a virgin, it sounds to me like someone implanted an embryo in her womb.
So first of all, no, wait, hold on. I do feel the need to ask this. Are you asking from a religious perspective, which one is this more like? Or are you asking from a secular perspective? Or are you just kind of saying in general, like Doug's feelings?
Let's go with Doug's feelings, and then I want the religious perspective.
Okay, so Doug's feelings is that it's horrendously unlike nothing else. Because in vitro fertilization is exterior work, is taking out something, doing exterior physical, real world human work on it and plugging it back in with a human sperm. An Immaculate Conception does not have a human sperm. That is how Jesus was supposedly, by the Catholic perspective at least, supposed to be fully divine and fully human. So at best, this is an IVF with a God sperm, if you want to draw that parallel. And I just feel like that's not, I feel like that's an improper way to draw that parallel.
Sure. And that's why I said I wanted to do it philosophically, so that you didn't feel like you were, slandering religion or you were blaspheming. Or
that's fine. I mean,
I don't want anyone kicking your doors in for heresy. So
every religion is probably wrong in some way because there's one that's completely right. Of course, that makes sense because we're all so fantastic.
No, I agree. But in my mind, essentially, God planted an embryo in Mary.
Well, yes, but see, at the same time. And this is not even religious. I feel like if you're going to allow for the fact that, at least from a thought project perspective, if Jesus, because remember, Jesus is not just God's son, he's God. The way the theocracy goes, the theology goes, is that he is God. He's the another person of God. He's not just God's son or God's offspring or God's like extension, like in like sort of the what we were talking about before with Brahma, Hinduism. He's not like a plucked off piece from the big God. He is the God. So to say that Jesus is a God version of IVF is also in some ways wrong. He's not disconnected, even like an embryo is from a human being. This is sort of like some sort of weird like essence of God. This was another thing we talked about in that summer reading course a long time ago about omnipresence. How is it possible for God to be omnipresent literally by physics? But the argument would be that Jesus is not an actual like implantation. He is just God in there, and he's just manifesting himself this way, which is different from a placement. It's a manifesting, which is something that I think, again, we can't really wrap our heads around. But if you're going to take purely the thought project religiously, there's absolutely nothing about Jesus that's an implant. It's just his avenue that he took. It's almost like the road he picked to walk down for his time on Earth. It has nothing to do with biological processes in a way. That makes sense.
We're going to have an entire podcast about this.
God, it's so good.
I want to argue this one with you a little further down the rabbit hole, but
I totally see where you're going.
I think we're just going to make circles, though. I don't think it's going to get us any further.
No. And I, to be fair, you do make a solid point of like, if you're just looking at it from a purely secular perspective, like if God, I mean, hell, that's actually, what a good thing to support your argument is John the Baptist. Because Elizabeth I think her name was Elizabeth, she was unable to get pregnant. Like crazy. She was an old lady by comparison standards. And she got pregnant a little bit before Mary. And, John the Baptist in the womb jumped for joy when Mary came through with Jesus. So that is closer to an IVF because John the Baptist is fully human 100%. He's not God. And somehow Elizabeth got pregnant.
Yeah, but
when she hadn't been.
But nobody is pushing state laws on me based on John the Baptist. They're doing it based on this Christian monotheistic God.
I mean, I don't know. They kind of had to do the whole hide from Herod thing.
All right, let's get on to the next part of your
yes.
Your diatribe that I was taking grief
with.
Tom,
these coals hurt. Stop dragging me.
I love it. This is great. It's so nice to disagree with you. I love this. This is nice. This feels right.
I have to admit, I do have the most fun when I'm upset with you.
Yeah, it's the best, right? You talked a little bit there, sort of in your and you didn't want to sound callous about it, but you reduced it to like an easily understood statement.
But I mean, I will be. I mean, there's no way to deliver.
I appreciate that you were trying to not
uncallously. Yeah,
right. I appreciate that you at least made the effort to empathize and humanize with people.
It's basically like saying not to be a dick, but
it is. Yes, it is. Yeah. But sometimes there's no better way to say something than a way that seems curt and offensive, and usually at least that is honest and short and concise, and there's something to be respected about that at least. But you had said, if it's not in your biology and it's not in the cards for you, then you're kind of fucking with the process. Fucking with the process was the exact term you said that I wrote down that I was fascinated in. Two different points on that. One, a lot of people, and again, I'm speaking without being finally educated, so if I'm incorrect, somebody can yell at me and tell me I'm an ignorant bigot. My understanding is that a lot of times if a woman goes through sexual trauma when she's young, it can scar the uterine lining and it can scar certain things, and that would leave her unable to be impregnated through, we'll call it natural biological processes. She can't get pregnant through sex, but IVF still works for some of them because they can reach a higher point on the uterine wall and it can adhere, and she can still have a child that way. So in a lot of these cases, if someone is a trauma victim, are you really, is that still fucking with the process, or did someone else fuck with that process and this horrible victim is finding a way to overcome that trauma? That's my real question. Is that still a case of someone who just should deal with it and is fucking with the process, or is it more acceptable in that situation?
Okay. Well, I guess if you want to be short and curt for this, yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's your answer. The knee-jerk poor man's lazy response is to say, well, yeah, someone could assault me and cut off my male jewels, and they're fucking with my process, and tough shit. A freak lawnmower
someone could
accident.
say that, but is that how you feel? I want your opinion. I don't want what some guy could say. I don't want this bullshit scarecrow straw man argument that you threw at me a while ago.
I'm getting there. But then the counter argument to me saying, well, what if someone just F's with your process some other way that's also irrevocable? That doesn't really address the question, because then it could just be, okay, well, what if someone found a way to reattach your jewels 5-10 years later, and now you have a shot again, would you still do that? And the answer from a lot of people would be yes. So that doesn't really solve the quandary. IVF just happens to be available. Just because it's not available for other issues doesn't automatically mean IVF shouldn't happen. So I'm supporting kind of your question from you can't just respond the quick and easy way of saying that it just usually doesn't work that way. So I think what you're saying is sort of like how I was getting at, well, this was the hand you were dealt. You can't do this normally or have a high success rate. You're saying, well, yes, the hand you're dealt was that you were around when IVF is around, something along those lines, right?
Yes.
And you want to know my feelings about that? In short, I will admit this one is very hard for me to uncouple in my mind from a religious, at least tainted viewpoint on this. And for the record, just for you, Tom, I did use the word tainted as a mild pun. Just
I thought you might have, yeah.
Because you said you were.
I am the taint. We've talked about this.
You are the taint, yes.
Yeah.
So the whole point of this entire podcast is that we're not perfect. We're dads. We're trying our best. We're doing great, but we're not like super human all the time, super perfect, doing everything right. We're just trying to be good enough. And that's sort of where I'm going with this here, is just because it's available doesn't make it right. And I mean, that's in all facets of life. The easy one is murder, but I mean, we can talk about things like embezzlement or theft or, abuse, things like that. So just because IVF is available doesn't automatically mean that, oh, well, God graced you with this wonderful medicine. I mean, hell, you can still find the ads where they're telling you to give your 1-year-old Coca-Cola, because start them early, start them young, because Coca-Cola is so great, with actual cocaine in it. And that was doctor approved for a long time.
I've got a police story for you about a mom. Similar story to that. We'll tell that another time.
This is a whole other aside, but the first time I found out when they started giving anesthesia to infants for major surgery, I was appalled. That alone has made it really hard to literally trust any doctor about anything ever again. Because I feel like if you have a child, you have to understand that they feel things physically. I don't know where someone decided that, oh, they're infants, so they just can't feel pain yet. It's bonkers. But anyway, so I guess that's sort of my response to your question, is the fact that IVF is available doesn't automatically mean that it's a good tool, that God has graced you with living in this time to have it. I'm also not saying that that's not the case, because at the end of the day, I do lean on the fact that this is the biological process. This is a very powerful process. I think it is trivialized so much that people often forget what procreation really is, like what it really is, especially when it comes to humans. Yes, I'm one who thinks that we're different from all the animals, but this is something that can create a fully functioning human being with potentially, as we talked about, a soul, a tap into a non-physical realm. The fact that we have been given the ability to do that with potentially whomever we so choose is a mind-numbingly big responsibility, I feel like, if you really try to take it for what it is. So IVF is one of those things that, while it could be interpreted as messing with the process and trivializing it a little bit, in another sense, it could be viewed, if used correctly, as one hell of a tool, because it's one of those things I feel like if it is, quote, used correctly, it can actually be a very good thing, potentially. But we're human, so how often do we use things like that correctly? Really? We're not going to use it correctly all the time. So I am naturally predisposed to erring on the side of caution and saying, well, the hand I was dealt is something that sort of, at least from, and this is why I said I can't uncouple it from a religious perspective, because I always try to view this from sort of my own, what I'm supposed to do kind of life. And I know it's not fair to ascribe that to everyone else. Not everyone is supposed to do everything that I'm supposed to do too.
That's not how the state of Alabama feels. Go for it.
No. Well, you have to set some ground rules. Like there's the 10 Commandments from the religious perspective. There's the Bill of Rights from the constitutional perspective. I mean, we can't all just run around hatcheting each other. So every culture has had some version of these kinds of ground rules. Yeah. But for me, it's sort of the risk thing. If I was not granted this ability that many other people have, morally, ethically, intellectually, whatever, the safest position is to say, well, maybe I shouldn't have had this capability. Whether or not that's actually true, I can sort of lean on that, rest on my laurels, if you will, and say, I cannot do anything wrong with whatever hand I was dealt by God or the universe or the cosmos if I don't go out of my way to change something that I normally don't have as an ability. So there you go. You just got a real big puzzle piece from me, which is why I argue some of these things. I will be one of the first people to admit that this Alabama ruling on its face looks like a very huge asshole move and looks like a very iron-fisted. I don't want to say controlling, but it is like it's different if a little local town of 5,000 people had this ruling than it is an entire state, because of the impact that this can have, considering what America is supposed to be with the whole melting pot aspect. So it does look like that. But there is part of me that's programmed to say that this is not entirely false, because it's in effect trying to limit something that potentially could be something we're not supposed to be doing. I'm not saying it's not, but I just know kind of the same thing with the when does something become a human? We can all kind of agree that something very specific happens at the embryonic stage. It's kind of like that. You can hang your hat on, I know for sure that if I follow exactly what my physical capabilities are, I'm probably not doing anything out of line. It's at least harder for me to do stuff truly out of line. But, and here I go, I'm just going to like counteract myself because I'm so good at it. We are humans. We have talents. We're supposed to be ingenious and solve problems. Part of our test is to help other people and solve other people's issues that people are put in our way, I think, religiously, to help us grow as people and become better as people. I mean, there's a whole fucking parable about the talents. The guy who had one talent, who didn't do anything with it, got admonished because he just buried it and guarded it. But the guys who had 10 talents and the guys who had 3 talents or 5 talents or whatever it was, they had different talents. They had different, what was that?
I don't remember the numbers at all.
I believe it's, 1 and then 3 and then 5 maybe. And the guy who had the 5 talents went out and invested it and turned it into 10. The guy who had 3 went out and invested it and turned it into 5. And the guy who had 1 talent was sitting there saying, "Oh, I've got this 1 talent. I better not lose it for the boss man." And he buried it. And so then when the boss man came back and asked for the talents back, the guy who went out and invested it, he was praised. The guy who went out and did the 3 and turned it into 5 was praised. The guy who took the 1 talent and buried it was admonished, and he was told that he's a fool and stupid. So there, at the same time, we're not supposed to just sit there and say, well, this is what I've got and I'm going to protect it. You are supposed to try to go out there and expand yourself and expand what you have. This one's just such a heavy issue. I'm way more cautious approaching it. And I don't know. If it creates a whole other human, that's a whole new calculus for me. And this could just be something that, well, I'll change on in 5 or 10 years. I have no idea. Because
it sounds like you're already changing on it. You just hadn't realized it yet. Because you basically just argued in my favor for the last 30 seconds, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't think you understand, Tom. I've been doing this since I was 20.
Oh, I do understand. That's why it's so easy to get you to say the things I want you to say sometimes, because I know if I let you run with just enough leash, but I give you some bread, you're going to argue both sides of it. And when you argue my side with the passion you just had, I'm like, oh, no, he sees this. He gets this. Okay, he may not be on my side of the fence, but he's thinking about it.
Well, but that's the point. Is I do think about it. I mean, we had my whole King for a Day discussion, and that's I think the other thing that a lot of people have not understood about me in the past is I can sit there and tell you very rationally why this should be allowed, why IVF should be allowed. I can even sit there and tell you if I was king for a day, I would allow this. But I can also firmly tell you that I will never do this. I don't think I would ever do this because personally, I don't think it's right. But I am not the judge. It's not, I have to stop yourself from, completely and irreparably harming yourself, but I can't stop you from making your own choices. It would be wrong of me to stop you from messing up your own life. I have to stop you from messing up other people's lives, but I shouldn't stop you from messing up your own life. And IVF is so damn on that line because it involves creating another life. Does that go into the boundaries of messing up someone else's life? And I want to say no. but it's a whole different thing because we're talking about creating a life, not what you're doing to another life.
I would agree, but I would argue that the people who are considering IVF and the people who are going that route are the people who probably want to bring life into the world for the right reasons, as opposed to, like you and I have talked about, all the people who just casually don't appreciate this and don't understand what it really is, and then bring 7 or 8 kids into the world and just leave them and don't help to bring a positive power to them. The people who are doing this IVF, who are sinking their savings or borrowing money to do it, they are making a commitment to creating life and to raising this life in a positive way. And that's, I think, a big part of this is that the people who are going to do this aren't people who are doing it randomly and wantonly and recklessly, because those people couldn't afford it and they wouldn't go that far out of their way to do this sort of thing. And that's a big part of this, I think.
Well, and you know what? That's a very strong point. I will concede that. I just don't want it to be something that gets abused, if you will, because, I mean, bad analogy incoming. We should just create a little.
We could have a whole separate podcast, just bad analogies. For 45 minutes
we talked about your gambling dad that gambled away all his $2.8 million bucks. You know, can IVF be destructive? Do you have an IVF problem? Call this number 1-800. If it's 15,000, 20,000 bucks a pop, and you're like freaking out, and you spend half or more of your life savings at that point trying to take 5 or 6 shots at this, is that destructive? That is one of the things that becomes a very outcomes based judgment. I think if it works, you go, wow, great, really glad you did it, totally worth it. But if it doesn't happen, then you're maybe sitting there thinking, I could literally have $100,000 in the bank still, and now I have to work another 5 or 10 years or what have you down the line.
My guess is that the people who would have $100,000 in the bank if they hadn't done it are making enough money that they're not going to feel that impact. And the people who are going to be doing this, I mean, eventually you run out of capital. That's a huge sum of money. And eventually you run out of capital.
Though. But if
but then you stop.
Well, yes, but what if someone's using their 401k or their Roth IRA or something like that they spent their 20s building up or their teens building up, and now they kind of get desperate. Now they just wiped away 10 or 15 years of work that, thanks to compounding interest and appreciation and everything else, is actually a bigger wash.
I think those are the people who have already decided that life is more important and that a child and a family is more important than that. And I don't think that position would change. And I'm basing this on a very small number of people I know who've gone through this, one in particular. Yes. And I really think that to pull the trigger on this, to go through with this and to take a shot at this.
Well, it has to be worth it. It has to be worth even the chance for those people. And I think most people approach this, air quotes, correctly. In that sense, part of what makes it, do you really want it, is the cost.
Yeah.
But it can be financially detrimental and wipe away years of work to even try this. And, again, this is exactly why My King for a Day says, yes, this should be allowed to at least try, because this is your decision. You could, instead of using IVF, decide to turn around and gamble all of it away, or take that same amount on a couple of Las Vegas trips and just say, you know what, I wanted to have fun this time because I never did this in my 20s. And then you could sort of hurt yourself that way. There's plenty of ways to hurt yourself by dropping 50 or 100 grand. So
I feel like this is a noble action, and I think you see it as something other than nobility, and I think that's a big part of where we're not seeing eye to eye on.
No, I know a couple of different people that did this. And honestly, I just felt bad for them. I did not have this feeling of, I did have a little bit of a, and again, personal experience here. The people that I knew that did it already had kids.
Oh, wow.
And they had been trying desperately and had some other issues that it wasn't just purely age inflicted. I think there was some. These aren't questions. These aren't things you actually ask. Right. Oh, why are you doing IVF this time? What happened to your, there's no polite way to bring this up over wine. So, but I think there's some calculus for them changed mid kid having, and they were really hoping for that last kid, that second kid or whatever. And so they went for it. And so I just felt bad. I felt even worse in a way because that's like it worked before and now it's not. And so there was a part of me that wanted to say, listen, you actually had your child or children. So this is your chance maybe to say that you should just be focusing on them. But from another sense, this used to work and you were kind of hoping for that last, that last one. And now you're, and it was so important to you to try to get there that now you're just trying everything you can. And I can't pretend to really know exactly all the feels that I would feel if I was in those shoes. So I am trying to take this from a perspective of maybe not being emotionally involved gives a clearer view, but some things you have a better view on when you have gone through it, and some things you have a better view on when you have not gone through it. And I honestly don't know which one of these this is.
Yeah, that takes me pretty nicely to my last point, and that is just that, I've got 3 children, and we were extremely lucky and blessed in that we conceived very quickly when we started trying every time. We did have one miscarriage in there that's still hurtful and painful to think about, but every time we tried to conceive, we were very fortunate, and we did so very quickly. And the more I talk about this and the more I look at it, the more grateful I am for that, honestly. And for anybody who's going through something like this and you're struggling with this, I'm genuinely sorry that this is a challenge that's been put in front of you. I really am, because I don't know what it feels like, and it's got to be a hard one. And I hope you got someone supporting you through this in whichever direction you decide to go. If you don't, reach out. I will gladly give you long distance virtual hugs, and I'm happy to talk. And Doug,
Ass out hugs.
Right, ass out hugs. And despite the fact that Doug is so dead wrong on so much, so often, so much of the time, he's a good guy to support you too. I know he's a very empathetic and understanding guy, so he'll listen to. But honestly, if you're going through something like this,
but don't reach out to Doug.
Yeah, well, reach out to me first.
But
I don't want them to reach out to you and then give us bad reviews because of something you said, and I don't want that.
Well, and that's what I hope people are hearing from this, is that I have the proverbial asshole view, if you will, of a lot of things like this. It's not that I don't care, though, and right. I do want to make clear that I do not understand the struggle that goes with something like this. So right. I am absolutely 100% far from perfect. You think that all the things that I think are wrong, that I totally followed all those? So
I'm really just more mad that Alabama is, pushing a religious belief on people despite the First Amendment. And Doug doesn't care because he feels like they could have gotten to that point without religion. Absolutely religious. They put the image of God in the official state Supreme Court response.
We're all in the image of God, Tom. They put a picture of you in there.
If you believe that as part of your religion, there are plenty of people who do not.
One nation under God, indivisible. It's in there. It's around.
Do we want to go back through that list? I've got a much longer list of things.
It's on our freaking money, Tom. Every time you send a dollar bill at somebody, it says like "In God We Trust" or something on it. Mm-hmm. It's on all the quarters. It's there.
It's on all the quarters. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what?
And they're bouncing off of strippers' asses somewhere too.
They are. Someone bounced $15,000 of it off of a stripper's ass in Las Vegas, and you'd rather they do that than IVF.
I feel like that is a bad use of IVF.
Yes, I think so too.
Okay, let's
get
go
to
dad. Yeah, let's go to dad jokes.
We said we were going to keep this to 40 minutes tonight. We've been recording for 1 hour and 29 minutes and 18 seconds so far.
I love how you found the timer finally. That's great.
Oh, no, I had to use my Clockify timer. There's not one on this Zoom.
Okay. Well, I'm going to leave that part in. So when people are like, wow, this is only, we've only been listening for 40 minutes. How much did they cut out?
Yeah, a lot.
A lot.
Do we want to do a top 3? We've gone long. I feel like we probably should. We should make ourselves stick to a formula.
Okay. Should I put it in the middle? There's no good spot to put it in the middle.
No. This will probably be leading right into our dad jokes.
Hey guys,
I have no updates.
Okay, so while we're trying to acclimate ourselves to this new formula that we're not following,
we're trying. We're just not good at it.
We're just not good at it. Yeah, let's do a top 3 real quick. It'll be fun.
Do like underrated movies or best books you've never read. Let's do something a little bit off kilter.
Okay.
Let's do top 3 movies the other person's never heard of. How about that?
Okay. I like it. I think I can do this one. Be great. Okay.
If the first one you name it has to be a movie you legitimately would put on a top list. It has to be a good movie. And
Mhm.
B, if the other person has heard of it, you don't get a point.
Oh, there are points now?
We're gonna do a points now. Yeah, we're gonna do a points on this one. Well, because the whole point of this one is underrated that you haven't heard of. Nah, all right, we're still underrated. Never mind. No point system. You've already lost the debate. I don't want you to lose twice and go to bed sad and you're drinking and
How sweet of you.
I'm a sweet guy. What can I say? When states aren't pushing their religious ideologies on me and punishing me because I don't necessarily see their view, I'm a pretty sweet guy.
My stage name is James.
I don't have $15,000 in quarters. I'm sorry, James.
Find them, bitch.
All right, so what are we
Okay.
doing? Underrated movies?
Yeah, let's do underrated movies. The first one, and I knew it. It's the one for sure that always comes in my mind thinking about this. I believe the title of it is called Bunraku.
I have not heard of them.
Bunraku. Again, I believe. I watched it one time forever ago in my apartment on Netflix. And you'll be sad that you've never heard of it because the protagonist, I believe, is played by Josh Hartnett.
Oh,
Yes. And the antagonist, I believe, is played by Ron Perlman.
really?
Yes.
That seems like a pretty
really.
good cast for me to not have heard of. Okay.
And it is, I feel like I've mentioned it before, maybe on one of our other episodes, but it's sort of a artistic fighter's quest kind of movie. Where you have various fighters, they all kind of have a signature move or a power move, and
Like Mortal Kombat style or
more God, what was the movie? It's meant to be more bright color palette, artsy, wavy martial arts. Oh, what was the movie with the English dub? The Chinese martial arts movie that was really big, like 15 or 20 years ago.
yeah, Ip Man?
Well,
IPMAN?
I like it, man, but it's
That
not
movie was
that.
good.
It was the big like in theaters that everybody went to see full movie. But it's one of those kind of deals where it's meant to be artsy, not mortal, but combat kind of thing. Like Josh Hartnett's character, his signature move is like a huge power punch, for example, and the bad guy who's oppressing everybody is played by Ron Perlman, and he ends up making his way to him, fighting him, and losing. And Ron Perlman is sort of a Thanos type character where he's basically saying, like, yeah, you're tough, kid, but you can't hold a candle to me. And then eventually he gets his way back and ends up, having a win. So it's that kind of quest-ish kind of thing. Really just loved that movie for some reason. It was absolutely not the kind of thing I normally go for, but it's one of those movies I tell people, if you have a chance to just sit down and watch it, watch it. It's actually kind of I thought, a cool movie. So that's my first entry.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Suicide Kings. Have you seen that one?
Nope. And I've never heard of it, I don't think.
Didn't think so. Suicide Kings has Christopher Walken and one of the brothers from the Boondock Saints and the kid. His name is Ezra in the movie. He's from the Big Bang
Really?
Theory. Yeah. The kid from
Huh.
Big Bang Theory who was the main, not Sheldon, his roommate. I can't think of his name now, but the lead from Big Bang Theory who was with Penny, him when he was young. It's and it's got the comedian. He plays poker. He was in Everybody Loves Raymond, but he wasn't Raymond. What is his name? The tall guy. He's hilarious.
Brad Garrett?
Yeah, it's got Brad Garrett in it, and it's got
No, this is like
Dennis
this is
Leary. Dennis
right. This
Leary's
is
in
one of
it.
those movies where you're like, how have I not heard of this movie?
It was a very low budget film, and it was probably late 90s, early 2000s. And the premise is very simple. Someone needs a lot of money. I'm sorry. Someone's girlfriend gets kidnapped and demands a ransom, and they don't have the money for the ransom. So her boyfriend and his college or just post-college friends get this brilliant idea. Hey, there's this mafia boss who like made a big deal about retiring and getting out of the business. Let's kidnap him and force him to either find her or give us the money. And Christopher Walken, they tie him to a chair and literally cut off one of his fingers to show him they're serious. And you could just imagine how things go wrong. and he's very Christopher Walken, and it's a fantastic movie. It's called Suicide Kings, and it is a phenomenal flick. And it's short. It's like an hour and 15 minutes probably.
Oh, really?
It's a super
good.
short, but it is really good, and it's a good hit. That's my number one right there.
Nice.
And the
Nice.
cast is pretty solid too.
Yeah. Normally I'd want to say Lucky Number Slevin, but I know you've seen that.
That
And
was what I wanted to mention too, but we've
I
talked
know.
about it already.
I
That
think
movie is so underrated though.
That's so underrated. So that's our honorable mention, because I found a lot of people have not seen Lucky Number Slevin for some
Or
reason.
even heard of it.
Right. And most people haven't, but it's for those of you listening, no matter what else we say on this list, I would actually say you should go see Lucky Number Slevin. It is so confusing and confounding as shit through the entire first half or 2/3 of the movie. And you finally start figuring out what's happening. And then it kind of takes another twist. And by the end of the movie, they literally wrap everything up into a nice little bow, and they show you where every single fucking reference they ever got came from. It's a beautiful movie. It's fantastic. If you,
And you know what else?
Worth seeing for sure.
Yes. And you know what else? It's fun. It's not one of those movies that like takes itself so seriously, and it is so intent on misleading you and not letting you figure it out that it's not fun. This is a fun movie. The humor is perfect. It's
a lot of funny.
Yeah, Josh Hartnett, and I forget her name, but she's fantastic.
Lucy Liu,
and Morgan
and
Freeman,
Bruce Willis,
and Bruce Willis, yeah,
and Morgan Freeman, and Ben Kingsley.
Yes, and it's fun and fantastic.
So good.
Yeah, if you like comedy, you'll like it. If you like drama, you'll like it. If you like action, you'll like it. It's just a good movie. No joke, I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. Easy, and people have heard this movie.
Easy. I'd give it a 9. Honestly, it's one of my like favorite movies. When I see it anywhere, I'm like, oh, I kind of want to watch this. It's always there.
So we're gonna put that as actually our unanimous number one for you listeners, then, and we won't count it on either of our individual lists. But
yes,
all right. So give me your second one.
Okay, my number 2. It's borderline for me for the qualifications for this list, because the reason it's my number 2 is not completely necessarily because it's a great movie. It's because of the specific performance in it.
Okay.
It's called Vice.
I've not seen it.
I think it's just called Vice.
Okay.
And it stars a bunch of nobodies, at least as far as I was concerned, a bunch of nobodies, and Bruce Willis.
Okay.
The reason I'm putting this on my top list is because Bruce Willis plays the bad guy.
Nice.
And I'm not sure there's too many spots where he ever actually does that. He's usually playing a good guy, or at least some sort of tragic hero of sorts. In this one, he
plays the bad guy.
Who?
Lucky Number Slevin.
Sort of, but he's not really a bad guy in that movie. He's just doing a job. He's the cat. He's the hitman.
The jackal. Yep. He's the bad guy.
He's the jackal. Okay, sorry. I thought he was the cat in that movie.
Maybe it was what did I think? The jackal was Richard Gere. And
I think he was the cat.
The Richard Gere movie, he's the jackal. Yeah. There's a movie, The Jackal, and he plays an assassin, international assassin, and that's a good one too.
But in that movie, he's not really he's just taking advantage of the protagonist and antagonist, sort of. He's sort of an anti-hero in that, because in Lucky Number Slevin, in a way, and I won't say any more because that could actually ruin it for anybody watching it. So in Vice, though, he is just the bad guy. He's the kingpin that has to be taken care of. And like I said, the movie is not, it's very futuristic. I think you have android human sex workers and that kind of futuristic dystopian setting. But I watched this movie and I remember thinking, wow, Bruce Willis played a really good bad guy. It was almost worth watching just for his performance in it. It was a pleasure to watch a good actor just purely do good acting, especially in something that is not normally his cup of tea, I think, in most of the movies that he's known for. So that's why I'm putting it on here, because that movie, well, obviously I still remember it after all this time, as I thoroughly enjoyed watching that performance on screen. So I'm going to put that one in there.
Okay, I like it. I'm not going to put it on my list, although I thought about it, but I honestly have no idea how well it was received. Have you seen Nefarious?
Is that one of the horror ones?
Yeah.
No. If
It
it's
is
horror, I probably have not seen it, to be honest.
That's fair. It is a horror movie that made me think of you. My brother recommended it, and again, I don't know if it's popular or not.
Nefarious.
So yeah, he and I we do horror movies. That's one of our bonds. But it's about a serial killer who's being interviewed by a psychologist before he's got 24 hours left before he's executed, and he tells this guy that he's possessed by a demon, and the whole thing is basically them in an interview room and him making a convincing argument that he is actually infested with a demon and possessed, and that it's not the body doing it. And it's kind of left up to you to decide, is this a play so he can't be killed, for insanity purposes, or is it real and legitimate? And because of your faith, and we've touched lately on something before, I thought you might be interested, but really interesting movie. And I touch on it because the performance is sensational. It's again the same brother from the Boondock Saints who was in Suicide Kings, not Daryl from Walking Dead, the other one, but he is
Norman Reedus.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And he's just remarkable. But yeah, that one's probably too popular for me. I will go with a horror movie for my number 2, and that is Unfriended, Dark Web, which I stumbled across completely by accident about 6 months ago. And it's probably the only movie I've sat down and watched in just one sitting since I had my third child. It was so good. I watched the whole thing all the way through. And then I watched it again like 2 days later. I was like, that was original and fresh and amazing. So if you like horror
that's
movies,
a pretty good review, actually.
Yeah, if you like horror movies, and this one does not pull punches. Anyone who might listen to this, it will make you uncomfortable. Unfriended, the Dark Web is a really dark, haymaker throwing, scarily realistic, and could happen in real life. It's not one of those things where there's a monster coming out of the bed. Everything in here is done by real people on the dark web. And if you've got a Tor browser and you know anything about onion sites, you know that everything that happens is super plausible. And that's what makes this one so scary. I'm going to end it on a happy note. Don't worry. My other choice is super easy. So I'm going to end it on a happy note.
Oh, this is the problem, is I can't. I know I went through a phase where I saw a bunch of oddball movies, but some of them are so oddball I can't even remember the titles, even, like, it's much less all of the plot lines. I know that sounds bad, like that doesn't really fit the narrative. I guess I'm a sucker for crappy movies. That's the problem. I can't call it a good movie. I'm just looking through to see if any of these lists catch me, because there is one more I sort of have, but I can't remember the title of it at all.
I feel like it couldn't have been too good then.
I could probably figure it out. Okay, I'll look it up, and the problem is I won't call it a good movie. My God, I have to pee. Which is not helping with this.
That's going to fit nicely with my dad joke. It's okay.
All right, 1 second.
There was a time where when Doug would step away to go ahead and exercise his little pregnant bladder, that I would sit here and I would tell jokes and I would play by play and I would do color commentary and have fun with it. Frankly, these days I'm a little bit too tired for that. So instead, I'm going to tell some mustache jokes, because my dad joke today was a mustache joke. Doug sent me a picture of him with his handlebar mustache, and we're going to tie that to the episode that released about his arrest. I think that was episode 13. But it inspired me to look up some mustache jokes. So for anyone who's interested in bad dad jokes, I never liked the idea of having a mustache, but then it grew on me. Sometimes some people grow a mustache without anyone knowing about it. You can call it their secret stash. Did you know that mustaches are taking over? It's happening right under our noses. And then one that's kind of told often and often, but since I'm telling bad mustache jokes, and hopefully Doug's going to edit all these out anyway, I like the way that my friend Sam's mustache looks. So I figured I'd say something nice about it. And I can't understand why she's so mad at me over a compliment. And Doug's back. He sat back down. He's in his chair. He's putting in the earbuds. I think he's got the mic back on. We're good. He's staring dreamily into my virtually represented zoomy eyes.
You
Welcome
mean
back,
the
Doug.
the eyes who always disagree with me
It's nice
on
to
our
disagree
on our
with you.
religious rulings?
It's so nice to disagree with you.
You know, I can see that you're still talking when I'm coming back.
Oh, of
Let
course,
me.
of course.
Okay,
I'm
I have
excited
to
for you to listen
find.
to it.
I was trying to figure this out.
What's it about? Maybe I'll have seen
Well, then it won't be good for the list, Tom.
it. That's fair. What's also not good for the list is 30 minutes of dead airspace while you try to remember instead of Googling it.
Well, that's
I have
my
to be
problem.
on an airplane in 5 hours,
I
Douglas.
know, I
5
know.
hours.
I'm sorry. I know. I was gonna say it's my problem later. Okay, let me see if I can find. Let me try to take one quick, like 30-second Google search.
I'm glad we're doing top 3 and not top 5. That seems like a good choice. This is probably a tough topic to do 5 for.
Yes. We got to find something that people haven't seen, and I have one.
I'm sure some people have seen it.
Okay, I found it. I mean, some people have probably seen it. So the movie is called Arq, ARQ, and it's a sort of like a Groundhog Day, but futuristic war dystopia, like oppressive government rebel faction kind of movie without giving away everything. I really liked the movie because of the sort of the twist at the end, the 2 twists at the end. While I'll admit I'd have to watch it again to confirm. I think there may be one slight logical inconsistency with it, but it's just one of those movies that actually, right when you think you're figuring it out, right when you think you figured out what's happened, they throw 1 or 2 more things at you that really help. So, guy wakes up in bed with his girlfriend. I believe he is part of the rebel resistance. And there are 3 masked intruders who have broken into where he's at. And he ends up getting shot by them and killed. And then he wakes up again, and same Groundhog Day concept. He kind of goes, what's happening? And he figures out what's going on slowly. And there's all sorts of plot twists with everybody involved, but long story short, they figure out that they're stuck in a loop that's about a week long-ish or so, 1 or 2 weeks long. And it's a great twist at the end to really depress you in a weird sort of way. But I remember watching that movie, and I like movies like that. I like dystopian, post-apocalyptic / thought projects like Looper, to drag another Bruce Willis movie into it. Like Looper is a good movie.
Flick.
It's a good movie, but that's one of the ones that it wasn't that big of a shock to me, I suppose. Like there was stuff that was like, oh, that was cute. Oh, that was a good idea. But I didn't sit there going, wow. And for some reason, maybe it was just the way it was structured. At the end of Arq, I was going, wow, I did not expect that. That's awesome / awful. So that's my nomination. ARQ. Arq.
ARQ. I feel like Looper was in a class with like I Am Number 4, a really good movie that
I like that
wasn't
movie.
popular, and I don't know why it wasn't
A
popular.
lot of people haven't seen I Am Number 4
that was a
either.
good
That's a
movie,
decent.
yeah.
I actually liked that movie.
That
It was a little
probably
bit
would have
silly,
made
but
this
I
list
liked it.
if we'd have gone to
I
5,
liked
it probably
that,
would have been.
yeah.
It was a good flick.
Well, but see, we should have done points. I
Yep.
should have let you
And
do that one.
Push, have you seen Push? Chris Evans and Dakota Fanning?
No.
Oh
Let's say
gosh,
no.
that one should be on my list. You need to see Push. That movie is super good. That one is a 9. It's better than Lucky Number Slevin, I think. It just
Really?
it was good, and no one's heard of it.
Wow.
And it blows my mind that no one's heard of it. It's super good.
That's
but
just such a weird. Oh, I found a list where it says Source Code. Have you seen Source Code?
no.
I should have nominated that one. That one's not bad. But Arq was more rocking to me, so I'm glad I picked what I picked.
I'm writing them all down. That's cool. Take me a year, but I'll watch them.
Source Code's another Groundhog Day one. Jake Gyllenhaal plays the main character, and I think Michelle Monaghan plays sort of the other protagonist-ish in it.
Supernatural did an episode like that, and it's my favorite episode of the whole show, and it's hilarious, and they just nailed the comedic aspect of it. It's fantastic. Dean it's the same day over and over, and Dean dies in a new way every day.
Yeah, and Sam just keeps go through it, and that was one of the Gabriel introductions, I believe.
Yep, that was back when they thought he was Loki. Yep, that was just the greatest episode.
Well, he was.
Yeah, by far. My number 3 is one that you've probably seen, but I am shocked at how many people do not love this movie, because I think it's probably one of my 20 favorite movies of all time. Not best movies, but certainly one of my favorites. And that's The Replacements with Keanu Reeves.
Oh,
that movie's fantastic. And almost no one that I know likes that movie, and half of them haven't seen it. And it's so quotable, and it's so hilarious, and it's so fun. It's just great. Replacements is a great movie. Whether you're a football fan or you just want to laugh, that movie's great.
Yeah, that is a good movie. I have to admit, I've liked that movie a lot.
All right, let's get to dad jokes, because again, I got to be on an airplane in no time. I got to shave first. I got to get some kind of sleep.
Just send your avatar.
Yeah, it doesn't work. DC doesn't like avatars.
All right, mine was stupid. I'll just stick with it.
It's okay. Mine's stupid too, but it's going to be fun.
When does a farmer dance?
When does a farmer dance?
Mm-hmm. Might not even be that funny, if that helps you.
I don't know. When does a farmer dance?
When the beat drops.
I like that one. That's right up my alley.
Perfect.
I like that. So my daughter told me one that she wanted me to tell. And it's not the one I wanted to tell. You sent me the picture of you with the handlebar mustache, and I wanted to tell a mustache joke. So I'm going to give you 2. I'm going to give you one from my daughter. Why did the chicken cross the playground?
I feel like I have no chance with this one.
You definitely should get this one.
I should?
Yes, you should figure this
Why
out.
did the chicken cross the playground?
Yeah.
Well, it's not to get to the other side.
No, it is not. I've seen him go from thoughtful consideration to irritation.
It's like the sandbox, the monkey bars. I don't understand. There's no hen house in a playground.
I should hope not.
There's no eggs on a playground.
I think it's worse
because
I told you should get it.
Okay, wait, hold on. Because it wanted to get to the other slide.
There you go. Attaboy.
Yes.
Put the applause soundtrack in there because you earned it. You got there.
No. Oh man.
And then the one I wanted to tell, because you sent me the handlebar mustache photo that made me happy.
Yes. Which, by the way, so this is a good time to plug this. We should have our Patreon up and running now, which we'll plug officially at the end here. But the Patreon, we do want to give some exclusives on there. And episode 14, which came out at the end of February, I told my long-winded story about my legal troubles, if you will. And I still have the photo of when I shaved down to the handlebar mustache that started it all. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, we're thinking you should have access to that photo just for your own, like, oh, what the hell was he thinking? So if you want to see it, you can get it. You want to put it?
I want to put it on a coffee mug. I'm not sure what the line is going to read yet, but I want to put it on a coffee mug. Not the worst
idea.
Hopefully we figured that out by the time this is released.
It's not going to be a mustache ride. That's too cliche.
So the mustache dad joke.
Okay.
What do you call a mustache soaked in urine? Another one you should get, but I liked it, so I'm including it anyway.
A mustache soaked in urine?
Yep.
I don't think I'm going to get this one. I'm trying to think of piss and pee and wee and whiz. I don't know. I can't even come up with some crappy answer. I really can't.
Well, that's okay, because the answer's pretty corny. A pistachio.
That made my soul happy.
Oh, good. I'm glad we ended on
thank you
more
for that
solid,
one, Tom.
uplifting notes.
I'm not mad at you anymore.
Oh, good. That's good. I'll sleep better. My 3 hours of sleep tonight are going to be much better now.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That was good. That might be one of the best ones yet for me personally. I'm really enjoying this one.
Good.
Not R. Kelly style, just
Yeah.
platonically. All right.
So I
on
guess it's
Tom's
time to
happy
wrap it
note.
up. Yeah, I haven't said that in like 2 episodes. I almost said it here. I've been good.
I mean, you should. I mean, for all the people playing bingo amongst themselves, it's really a disservice to not say it.
We do have to spread those bingo cards out. Start making some prizes.
Yeah. All right. Well, then I'll say it this time. On that happy note, thank you very much for listening. We appreciate you. Thank you for listening to yet another lovers quarrel. I do think that's some of our best material when we are quarreling as lovers. And like us, subscribe us, review us, do reach out and tell us if there's something you think we could be doing better, something that we could be doing worse, something that you want to hear us talk about. We think that we're best when we're semi off the cuff, but also we just want to make sure we are doing this for you. And check out the store. We've got some fun merch. Check out the Patreon because we're going to have some exclusive content, and we are hoping to expand that into essentially some sort of exclusive benefits. We're going to be trying to network this thing out to do some real dad work with just any sort of discounts or memberships or anything else that we can get you guys, because dads need more support. And if we can use that to branch it out, we're going to take advantage of it. So check out the Patreon, check out the merch, tell other people about us. We want to make this a thing that helps.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for putting up with Doug. We love you guys. And
yes, thank you for putting up with me.
And we will catch you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening.
Good night.
Bye, Felicia.